It started with a detour. That Thursday in early October, I left work just after 4 p.m., which was rare for me. I'd wrapped up the last of my quarterly reports, my team didn't need me, and I figured maybe it was time to lean into being the kind of husband who comes home early once in a while. Thought I'd grab Laura's favorite, green curry and jasmine rice from that little Thai place near the toll road. Maybe even surprise her with one of those lemon coconut cakes she always pretended to resist. Something felt overdue between us. I couldn't explain it, but lately she'd been harder to reach, like something was always slightly in the way, like a pane of glass between us neither of us wanted to acknowledge. Pulling into the driveway, I noticed our porch light was already on, even though the sun hadn't fully dipped below the horizon. That was odd. Laura usually waited until dark. Inside, the house was silent. No music, no TV. Just the quiet creak of the air conditioner kicking on as I stepped into the living room. I set the takeout bag on the kitchen counter and turned toward the couch, hoping maybe she was napping or reading like she used to. That's when I saw it. 2 wine glasses, one on the coffee table, the other sitting on the windowsill. Both half full, her go-to Malbec, judging by the deep red hue. That alone wasn't the strange part. What unsettled me was the freshness. One of them had condensation near the base still beating. When I picked it up, it was warm, like someone had just set it down minutes before I arrived. I instinctively looked toward the hallway, expecting to see someone else walk out behind me. No one did. And then I spotted it, a hoodie. Not mine. Definitely not Laura's either. It was draped over the back of the armchair, sleeves dangling carelessly. A dark charcoal color with a gym logo stitched into the chest. Iron Core Fit grind. Sweat. Repeat. I had never been to Iron Core Fit. I didn't even know where it was. I worked out in our garage with a set of mismatched dumbbells and a Bluetooth speaker that only played 90s rock. A strange flicker went off in the back of my mind. Not a full alarm, but something. I walked down the hallway toward the laundry nook and bent down to pull my work shirt from the hamper. That's when I noticed a corner of light blue fabric sticking out from the top of the basket. A dress shirt, tailored. Not my size, not my brand, not something I had ever worn or owned. And it smelled faintly of cologne. Something spicy and expensive, the kind you notice in an elevator. My stomach sank. The front door creaked again, but this time it was the kitchen door opening. I turned, and Laura stepped into view, holding a hand towel and pretending not to be startled. "Oh, hey babe," she said, her voice rising half a pitch like she was covering for something. "You're home early." I didn't answer right away, just looked at her. She glanced at the takeout bag on the counter, then over at the wine glasses, her gaze pausing, calculating. She blinked quickly, then smiled as if she'd remembered a funny anecdote. Tom from next door stopped by. The Wi-Fi was acting up again, so I asked if he could help me reset the router. I offered him a glass while he was working on it. You know Tom, he always acts like he's in a rush, but he talks forever. Tom, the guy from 2 doors down, balding, late 50s, owns a pug named Chili? I'd seen him maybe 4 times in the past year. The man didn't know the difference between a router and a Roku remote. But I didn't interrupt. I let her keep talking. "He just left, actually," she added, wiping her hands and walking over to the sink. "Said he was headed home to catch the last quarter of the game." She was too calm, too fluid. Her movements felt deliberate, like a performance she'd rehearsed just enough to look effortless but not so much that it seemed unnatural. "You didn't hear me come in?" I asked. She shook her head. "I was in the back, looking for the old modem. Didn't even realize what time it was." I nodded slowly, my eyes drifting back to the hoodie. "Is that Tom's?" Laura followed my gaze and laughed lightly, but there was a flicker. Something tightened around her mouth. "Oh, yeah, that's his. I offered to wash it, he spilled a little wine on it." He protested, of course, but I tossed it in the basket anyway. Her tone was casual, but her words were a half-second ahead of her expressions. Like the logic was leading and her emotions were chasing to keep up. I walked to the laundry basket, pulled the shirt out, and held it up. "This his too." She blinked again. "Oh, that. No. It must be one of your older ones. From before you stopped wearing collars to work. It wasn't. I knew it. It was fitted slim through the waist and sleeves, a size I hadn't worn since my early 20s. It even had a monogram stitched inside the cuff. Someone else's initials. You sure? I asked, holding it out. Honestly, I don't even remember putting that in there, she said, a little too quickly. Might have gotten mixed in with the donations. The deflection came next. You know, she added, resting her hands on the counter and letting her tone shift slightly. You've been working pretty late lately. I feel like we barely see each other. I raised an eyebrow. What does that have to do with? I'm just saying, she cut in. Maybe we've gotten disconnected. We used to talk more, laugh more. Lately, I feel like I'm the only one trying to hold things together. That's when it hit me. She wasn't defending anything. She was redirecting, turning the scrutiny on me. And for a second, it worked. I felt the familiar stab of guilt that comes from being accused of distance. It was something I'd heard before, even believed at times. But this felt different. This felt prepared. The conversation shifted away from the glasses and the shirt and the hoodie. She started talking about her day, about how she couldn't figure out how to log into the new streaming app, about how the dog from the backyard had gotten loose again. She flooded the space with words until it was too awkward to circle back to what I'd walked in on. So I let it go. Or at least I acted like I did. We ate dinner on the patio, the weather still warm enough to sit outside. She poured herself more wine but didn't touch the other glass again. At one point, she even laughed at something on her phone and showed me a video of a dog dancing on its hind legs. But underneath the quiet hum of crickets and the occasional passing car, something else had settled between us. Not anger, not even suspicion. A weight, presence. I didn't sleep much that night, just laid there next to her, watching the ceiling fan spin, counting the seconds between the creaks in the floorboards and wondering how many little things I'd brushed off before this. After that night, I started remembering things I hadn't wanted to remember. It's strange how memory works. The mind protects you, shields you from things you're not ready to accept. But once the armor cracks, even a little, everything starts rushing in like a broken dam. The shirt, the wine glasses, the hoodie. They were the match. And now, every old flicker was a fire waiting to reignite. The first one that came back was from the summer. Early July. Laura had gone out with her coworkers for a casual happy hour. I didn't think twice about it at the time. She worked in marketing, and their team was always doing something social. I remembered she came home around 10, a little tipsy, smiling, saying how she'd lost track of time. She kissed me goodnight and collapsed into bed. But now I remember the scent. She reeked of cologne. Not perfume. Cologne. It clung to her like smoke. I had asked her about it, half joking, half not. She laughed and said her Uber driver had been wearing something strong, and that the car smelled like a Macy's cologne counter exploded. At the time, it sounded silly enough to be true. Now it just sounds stupid. Then there was the phone thing. She used to leave it face up on the nightstand, volume on, screen lighting up every time her sister sent one of those never-ending group messages. But sometime around mid-August, I noticed it was always on silent. Face down. She started taking it into the bathroom with her, something she never used to do. If I walked into the room, she'd flip it over, almost without thinking. One time, while she was folding laundry, it vibrated against the table and lit up. I caught a name, D. No last name, just the letter. She snatched it up before I could get a second glance. I remember asking, casually, "Who's D?" She didn't miss a beat. "Deborah," she said. "From the gym." I hadn't even known she was going to the gym again. That was another thing. She started working out more. I should have been glad. She said it helped with her stress. She bought new leggings, started drinking protein smoothies, downloaded a fitness tracker. But she never asked me to come with her. Never even told me which gym she went to. I figured it was her thing. Something personal she needed to do for herself. I didn't want to be overbearing. I didn't want to be that husband. Now I wish I had asked more questions. I also remembered that odd Dallas trip. This one had almost slipped from my mind completely. It was in late May. Laura said she was going to see an exhibit, some modern art thing her coworker had raved about. She'd booked a solo overnight trip, said she wanted time to think, decompress. I'd offered to go, even told her I'd take a day off and make it a little getaway. She shut that down quick. I just really need this one for myself, she'd said. You know how sometimes you just want to be alone? Sure. I knew that feeling. And again, I gave her space. Weeks later, while looking for an invoice in our shared email, back when I still trusted it, I stumbled across an e-ticket receipt. Not for the art exhibit. For a concert. In Dallas. 2 tickets. Her name, and another name I didn't recognize, Trevor Cole. I remember asking her about it. She said it was a mistake, that her friend Natalie had used her account to book them. She was surprising her boyfriend, Laura explained, without missing a beat. I let her use my login because she lost hers. I guess the confirmation got sent to me. It made just enough sense to quiet the voice in my head. But now that voice is back. Louder than ever. Trevor. I knew the name. It had come up before. 3 years ago, Laura had introduced him as a college friend. Said he was going through a breakup and needed a place to stay for a week or 2. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I wanted to be supportive. The guy was quiet, polite, helped with dishes. We'd even watched a playoff game together. I remember feeling bad for him. He stayed for 14 days. Then he left and we never talked about him again. Until that e-ticket. And then there was the family dinner. A month ago, we'd gone to her parents' place for her dad's birthday. I remember the weird tension even before we left the house. Laura was distracted, checking her phone more than usual, barely engaged in conversation on the drive. Once we arrived, she kept disappearing, stepping out onto the porch or into the hallway. Each time she returned, her mood shifted, lighter, brighter, like she'd just come back from a spa. I'd asked her once, teasingly, "Everything okay? You've been pretty busy texting someone." She smiled. "Oh, it's just Kayla. She's planning her wedding and wants me to look at dresses." That was her explanation. Later that night, I found out from Kayla's Instagram that she'd already picked her dress 2 weeks earlier. It didn't add up. None of it added up. Another detail came rushing back. A gold bracelet. I had seen it on her wrist during a dinner party at her friend Madison's place. It was delicate, with a tiny sapphire charm in the center. When I asked where it came from, she told me it was a gift from a colleague for helping out with a project launch. Kind of like a thank you/birthday present, she said. It felt weird at the time, but I let it go. Now, that bracelet is a neon sign blinking in the back of my mind. Because a week after that dinner party, I found the box it came in tucked inside her sock drawer. Still had the little gift card with it. It didn't say thanks for the help. It said, "For everything you've carried. You make it look effortless. T. Trevor." The worst part of remembering all this wasn't the anger. It was the realization of how carefully I trained myself to believe her, to accept every smooth answer, every deflection, every half-truth polished until it passed as sincerity. She was good at it, scary good. The small lies didn't feel like lies at the time. They felt like misunderstandings, like I just didn't get the full context. But now I could see how every small thing had formed a trail of breadcrumbs I never dared follow. Even her schedule had started to shift. She'd stay late at work more often, then claim she got caught up in traffic. There were receipts for places we'd never been, makeup she hadn't worn in years, and that new obsession with her appearance. Skincare routines, clothes she used to say were too much, a fresh gym membership that didn't match any charge I could find on our shared bank card. Little things, indefensible alone, but stacked. They told a story I hadn't wanted to read. I started going back through my calendar, my photos, even my texts with her, looking for proof, not just of betrayal, but of my own blindness. I wasn't sure what I hated more, the possibility that she had been unfaithful, or the fact that I had been so easy to fool. That's what betrayal does. It doesn't scream in your face. It whispers behind your back and lets you walk around with a smile while everyone else already knows. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed something undeniable. And soon I would get it. The message came on a Tuesday. One of those gray, washed-out afternoons where everything feels muted. Sky like wet cement. A drizzle you barely notice until you're soaked. I was between meetings, sitting in my car with a fast food coffee in one hand, trying to will myself back to productivity. My phone buzzed. The notification wasn't from anyone I knew. No name. Just a string of random numbers and letters, probably a burner account or some throwaway profile. At first, I almost didn't open it. Probably spam. Maybe a scam. But then I saw the subject line, "Thought you should see this." There was no text in the body of the message. Just one image. One photo. I tapped it open. I didn't react at first. Not physically, anyway. No yell, no smashed phone, no wild outburst like you see in movies. Just stillness. A sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach like the world had tilted and no one else noticed. It was Laura. In a bar. Not just any bar, the Harbor, a rooftop lounge in Houston we used to go to on special occasions. A place that held some of our happiest memories. She was pressed up against a man, her arms wrapped around his waist, her face tucked close to his neck like she belonged there. She was smiling, laughing even. Her body language told a whole story. In * Macy, familiarity, comfort. It wasn't casual. It wasn't platonic. It was him, Trevor. The same Trevor who'd slept on our couch after his fiancée left him. The same guy I had poured whiskey for and given relationship advice to, sitting across from him like an idiot while he nodded along and thanked me. In the photo, he was grinning, hand low on her back. They looked like a couple, like they'd always been one. The timestamp? 2 days ago. Sunday night. She told me she was meeting the girls from her old book club. Said they were doing a mini reunion and grabbing drinks. I'd even encouraged her to go. I remembered giving her a kiss on the cheek as she headed out the door. Now, that night had a new meaning, a new context. I stared at the photo so long my screen dimmed and went black. For a moment, I just sat there, numb. Then I forwarded it to myself, saved it in 3 different folders, and backed it up in the cloud. I don't know why. Maybe because part of me still didn't trust my own eyes, and I needed to know it wouldn't disappear, that I wasn't losing my mind. I didn't respond to the message. I never found out who sent it. Maybe someone who saw them and recognized her. Maybe someone who knew me. Maybe even someone close to Trevor who decided I deserved to know. Whoever it was, they shattered the last piece of doubt I'd been clinging to. That evening, I didn't say anything to Laura. I didn't storm into the house demanding answers. I didn't hold up my phone and ask her to explain what she was doing with a man she once swore was basically a brother. Instead, I watched. She walked through the door just after 6, holding a shopping bag and humming like nothing was wrong. She gave me a peck on the cheek, set her purse down, and started talking about the line at the boutique. Something about how everything was overpriced, but she found a deal on a blouse. I nodded, asked about her day, smiled at the right moments. Inside, I was somewhere else. I was staring at that photo again, playing it on a loop in my mind. Her smile, the way her hand rested on Trevor's hip, the way his fingers curled slightly around her waist like they belonged there. That night, while she showered, I pulled the bracelet from her drawer, the one with the sapphire charm and Trevor's initialed card. I laid it on the nightstand, right next to her phone. She didn't say anything about it, didn't ask how it got there, didn't offer a story. She just moved it, slid it back into the drawer like it had never left. That told me everything. The next few days were a blur. I went to work. I made dinner. I took out the trash and changed the sheets and pretended like nothing had changed. I was watching her now, not just seeing, but observing. Every gesture, every word, every moment that didn't quite add up. And the more I saw, the more I realized how much I'd missed. The sudden extra showers. The increase in laundry that didn't match what she wore around me. The way her phone never left her side anymore. The locked screen notifications she always cleared when she thought I wasn't looking. I noticed how she never said Trevor's name anymore. Not even when talking about mutual friends. As if erasing him verbally would erase the connection. It was all so subtle, so careful, so scripted, until one night she slipped. We were lying in bed, scrolling through our phones. She laughed at something on her screen and turned it toward me. A meme from someone's Instagram story. The username at the top read, TC. Fit. Trevor Cole. I recognized the profile picture. Same gym hoodie I'd seen over the armchair weeks ago. Who's that? I asked, keeping my tone flat. She blinked. Oh, just someone from my gym. He posts funny stuff sometimes. Cool, I said. Does he know you're married? She paused, only a second, but long enough. I mean, yeah, she said. Of course. But she turned off her phone right after. Rolled over. Pretended to be tired. That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. This wasn't an emotional lapse or some drunken kiss she regretted. This was a choice. A relationship. Built in the shadows while I was still waking up next to her every morning. A few nights later, I opened a new journal. A leather-bound one I'd received for Christmas but never used. Inside, I began cataloging everything. Not just the image, but the bracelet, the emails, the lies, the shift in her patterns. I printed **TS. Wrote down dates, times, names. Not for revenge. Not for drama. For clarity. Because when someone betrays you that deeply, your mind starts to question everything, even reality itself. And I needed a record. Something outside my head that proved I hadn't imagined it. That it happened. That I wasn't crazy. One entry read, March 12th. Meeting friends from work. Be back late. Photo timestamp from Houston Bar. March 12th. 10:47 p.m. Another. April 6th. Helping Natalie move. No moving truck seen. Charged Uber to Ironcore Fit address. Arrival. 8:52 p.m. Departure. 11:41 p.m. I wasn't stalking her. I wasn't hacking into anything. I was just listening, really listening, for the first time in a long time. And when you listen to a liar long enough, their story starts to unravel. The unraveling became addictive. One breadcrumb led to another. I found a playlist on her Spotify called Late Drives. All romantic songs. Sad ones. Introspective. It had been created around the same time she started taking solo road trips to clear her head. Another detail I couldn't ignore. Trevor's Instagram included a photo from the Las Vegas Strip, posted on a weekend when Laura had claimed to be at her mom's for a girls' spa weekend. I checked the dates. The hotel charges on our joint account didn't match the city she said she'd been in. I even found a receipt tucked into one of her coat pockets. 2 entrees at a steakhouse in Vegas. 1 wine. 1 whiskey. We hadn't been to Vegas in years. I made copies. Put everything in the journal. It wasn't about building a case anymore. It was about facing reality. Because the man in the photo had once been my guest. And the woman in his arms had once been my world. 3 years passed. It's funny how quickly time moves when you're surviving. When every day is about forward motion, wake up, breathe, eat, work, sleep, repeat. For a while, that was all I could handle. I never confronted her directly. Not then. Not the night I saw the photo, not the week I filled the journal. I just shut down. Quietly. Deliberately. I went numb to her touch, her laughter, her stories. I became a ghost in my own marriage. Until one day, I simply wasn't there anymore. I left a letter. No accusations. No demands. Just a simple goodbye, placed on the kitchen table next to a stack of unpaid bills and a copy of our wedding photo. She never opened the envelope. I know because I saw it years later, creased at the corners, still sealed. She called once. I didn't answer. She texted. I didn't reply. I disappeared. Not out of spite, but because staying would have meant becoming someone I didn't recognize. I couldn't scream, couldn't beg, couldn't fight. That would have made it about her. I wanted silence, distance, clarity. Eventually, she stopped reaching out, and I began rebuilding. Slowly, painfully. I moved to Denver for a while. Took a job that kept me on the road, out of my own head. Therapy helped. So did time. The journal stayed with me, though. Packed neatly in my suitcase. A quiet reminder of what I'd escaped. Some pages were dog-eared. Others tear-stained. But I never threw it out. Not once. It was my proof. My anchor. Then, in the spring of my 3rd year away, I heard from an old mutual friend. Someone who didn't know the full story but still kept loose ties with both of us. In passing, she mentioned that Laura had relocated to San Diego. Teaches yoga now, she'd said. Apparently walks the beach every morning. Like clockwork. I nodded politely and changed the subject. But I didn't forget. 2 months later, I flew to California. I told myself it wasn't about her. That I just needed closure. A clean final page to the story I'd never really finished. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I had memorized the beach she frequented. A coastal trail between 2 cliffs in Pacific Beach, just far enough from the tourist crowds to stay quiet most mornings. I booked a cheap motel nearby, not out of frugality but intention. I wasn't there for comfort. I was there for truth. And I brought the journal with me. Its leather was more worn than I remembered. The binding slightly torn near the spine. But the pages were intact. Every receipt, every photo, every contradiction neatly filed in sequence. I flipped through it one last time that night, sitting on a hard motel mattress while the ocean air blew through a cracked window. The next morning I went to the beach. She arrived like I knew she would. Hair pulled back, sunglasses on, earbuds in. She wore a white tank top and athletic leggings, a yoga mat strapped across her back. She didn't see me at first. I stood just off the trail, leaning against a crooked palm tree, waiting. When our eyes finally met, it was like watching someone recognize a ghost. She stopped mid-step. At first, I thought she might turn around. Her shoulders stiffened. Her hand reached for her phone, and for a moment, I saw panic flicker across her face. Then she walked toward me, slowly, cautiously. "David?" she asked, like she couldn't believe I was real. "Hi, Laura." Her eyes darted down to the journal in my hand. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. She knew exactly what it was, exactly why I was there. There was a pause, long, silent, thick with years of unspoken questions. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, she said, "Do you want to talk?" We walked. Not far. Just down the trail, away from the early joggers and dog walkers. Eventually, we sat on a low concrete ledge overlooking the water. The Pacific stretched endlessly before us, gray and restless. She kept glancing at the journal, but I didn't open it. "Not yet. I wasn't sure if I'd ever see you again," she said quietly. "I didn't plan to." She nodded slowly, pulling her legs up onto the ledge and hugging her knees. "Why now?" I took a breath. Because for the longest time, I convinced myself I imagined everything. That maybe I was the problem. That I had driven you away. Her face tightened. And then I started thinking, I continued, maybe I deserved answers. Not just to move on, but to stop rewriting history in my head. "I understand," she said. "Do you?" She didn't answer. I opened the journal, turned a few pages. Let her see the Vegas receipt, the photo from Houston, the bracelet card. Her shoulders sagged a little more with each item. "I know what it looks like," she said softly. "It looks like the truth." A long silence. "I married him," she said suddenly. I blinked. "Trevor," she clarified. "We got married a year after you left." I didn't speak, just waited. She kept going. "It didn't last. He left 6 months in. Took most of our savings. Moved to Florida, I think." There wasn't bitterness in her voice, just fatigue. "I thought he loved me," she said, eyes on the ocean. "But I think I was just his escape. Same way he was mine." Another silence passed between us, heavier than the last. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she whispered. "You just didn't care if you did." That landed. She winced, looked down at her hands. "You were always too kind to me," she said. "Too trusting. I didn't know how to carry that without breaking it. You could have said something. I didn't want to lose the version of me you believed in." I let that hang in the air for a while. Finally, I said, "That letter I left? You never opened it." She nodded slowly. "I couldn't. I think part of me believed if I didn't read it, then none of it was real. That you might come back. I did, I said. But not for you. She looked at me, really looked. Then why? I closed the journal, tucked it under my arm. To make peace with the past, I said. To remember that it's behind me. Laura stared at the waves for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm sorry, David. I truly am. I believe you, I said. And I did. But it didn't matter anymore. I won't contact you again, she said. That's probably best. She nodded, then stood up, adjusted the strap of her mat, wiped under her eyes. As she turned to leave, I added, I hope you find peace too. She didn't look back, just kept walking. And I stayed there a little longer, watching the tide roll in, the sky softening into a pale blue. My heart didn't race. My chest didn't hurt. I wasn't broken or bitter or lost. I was free. That night, she came to my motel. I hadn't invited her. I didn't even tell her where I was staying. But Laura had always been good at finding things out. I suppose you don't spend years hiding something like an affair without learning how to follow breadcrumbs. The knock came just after 9. I knew it was her the moment I heard it. The rhythm was cautious, almost apologetic, like even the sound of her hand on the door carried guilt. I considered not answering, letting the knock echo into nothing until she walked away. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. When I opened the door, she stood there holding a paper bag and a bottled water, as if this were some kind of peace offering. No yoga mat now, no sunglasses. Just Laura, a little older, a little worn. I figured you didn't eat, she said. I stepped aside without speaking, and she walked in. The motel room was small. Beige walls, old carpet, a humming window unit that never quite cooled the place. She sat on the edge of the single chair by the desk. I stayed standing. You still have it? She asked. I nodded, holding up the journal. It was on the nightstand, spine cracked open to the middle. She didn't ask to read it. She didn't need to. Her eyes stayed fixed on it like it was some sacred artifact, equal parts proof and punishment. After a while, she said, You really kept all of it. I needed to. Laura looked down at her hands. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. What hurt the most? Her voice was steady, but something in it sounded like she already knew the answer. I thought for a moment. Not the affair itself, I said. Not even the lies. What hurt the most was realizing I never really knew who I married. She flinched at that, just barely. It wasn't always a lie, she whispered. I believe that, I said. But it doesn't change how it ended. Silence settled again. She took the bottle of water and twisted the cap, then set it down unopened. I read your letter, she said suddenly. The one you left. I looked at her, surprised. I thought it was still sealed. I opened it last year, she admitted. After Trevor left. I found it while packing. I sat on the floor and read it 3 times. I wanted to call you. I almost did. But you didn't. No. I waited. You said in the letter, she continued, that you forgave me, even then. I did. But why? I leaned against the wall and folded my arms. Because I didn't want to carry it with me. The anger, the grief. It was heavy enough just walking away. She nodded slowly. He lied to me too, you know. Trevor. Said he'd start a business. Said he wanted a family. He drained the account and left a note. Ironic. I know. I walked over to the nightstand and opened the journal fully, flipping to one of the later pages. I turned it toward her. This is the bracelet, I said. The one you said was from a colleague, but the card had his name. She looked at it and nodded. I remember. And this, I continued, flipping to another entry, is the hotel receipt from Vegas. You said you were in Palm Springs with your mom. She said nothing. And this, I said, holding up the photo, the one of her and Trevor at the harbor. This is the night you told me you were meeting your book club. Still nothing. You always had an answer, I said, more to myself than to her. Every time I got close to asking the right question, you gave me a softer one to settle on instead. It was like living with someone who kept moving the walls of the house. I never knew where I stood. Laura looked at the floor. I never wanted to be cruel, she said, barely audible. I didn't know how to leave. So you waited for me to do it. Her breath hitched, but she nodded. I thought maybe if you caught me, she said, you'd leave angry, and then I wouldn't have to explain. I laughed bitterly. You thought I'd make it easier for you. I know it sounds awful. It is awful. She wiped her eyes, but no tears fell. Just habit. She looked drained, like the years had finally caught up to her in that one moment. You asked me earlier, she said. What hurt the most for you? Do you want to know what hurt the most for me? I didn't answer, but she went on anyway. It was the silence, she said. After you left. You didn't scream. You didn't beg. You didn't ask why. You just disappeared. And that made me realize how long you'd already been gone. Emotionally. I considered that. I think part of me died before I left, I said. Laura stood up and took a few steps toward the door. So what happens now? Nothing, I said. This was it. The last chapter. No big ending? She asked. No closure scene? This is the closure. She looked back at the journal one last time. Can I ask you to do one thing? What? Burn it. I shook my head. I'm not ready. She nodded like she expected that. As she reached for the door handle, I added, Do you ever miss us? Her hand froze on the knob. Every day, she said. But I don't deserve to. She opened the door, stepped out into the coastal night air, and didn't look back. I closed the door behind her. The room felt still again. Hollow. But not in the way it used to. Not like something was missing. More like something had finally finished leaving. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the journal. I flipped to the last page. It was blank. I picked up a pen and wrote. She asked if I'd burn it. Maybe one day. For now, I'll let it sit. Not as a wound, but as a scar that doesn't hurt anymore. Then I closed the book and turned off the light.